I'm from the World Economic Forum, and we are frequently known not only for the reports and the research that we do, but for a meeting of global leaders that we host every year in Davos, Switzerland, called Davos for short. And this year was one of as many strange outcomes of COVID. Davos was held in the summer, which is unusual. Normally it's in January, and all of us who get to go get to freeze ourselves to death and slug around in snow and such. But what it does is that cold winter time brings a sense of community together. So it was interesting to be at a time period when actually you were allowed to go outside. And the sense of community actually expanded as people came outside. And that's important because the focus of Davos this year was climate change. Of course, we talked about many other important topics, but climate change. And one of the big projects talked about was the First Movers Coalition. So the First Movers Coalition, as was introduced, seeks to actually bring together the purchasing power of private sector leaders to have their purchasing decisions serve as a way to pull forward innovative technologies, clean technologies that are necessary to actually impact sectors that all of us as individuals rely on. So we're moving from specific products necessarily to sectors. And what are those sectors? They're predominantly transportation and material sectors. What are you talking about? These are sectors that all of us, if you make products and you want to ship them, if you've traveled here, are ones that you use. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to, through demand signal, through purchasing, have innovative clean technologies cross what we like to say the valley of death, to get commercialized. Those great ideas that maybe you've had one and yet nobody bought it, you didn't cross the valley of death. What we're trying to do is have those great new clean energy technologies be pulled forward through a demand function by these companies who are making these commitments to buy products and services based on these technologies, to have them actually commercialized, and to do so to decarbonize these material and transportation sectors faster. And why do these sectors, and what actual sectors am I talking about, matter? Well, these transportation material sectors, you see the 7 of them mentioned here on the slide, these sectors actually account for 30% of the GHG emissions globally, and growing, and growing. And so as we have our meetings, we have COP 26, 27, 28, right? So we actually launched the First Movers Coalition last November at COP 26. We will finish launching these sectors at COP 27. But as we have these meetings, and as we have the IPCC reports come out, what we hear is we no longer have time. If we want to remain on a 1.5 Celsius pathway, we need to decarbonize now. We don't have the 20 years that we had since the Hanover Principles to make a change. It needs to happen now. And so this is why the First Movers Coalition was actually born. And as you see here, it focuses on decarbonizing, again, by creating a demand signal for purchasers, private sector, who buy in these sectors, to where in making that demand signal now, they're signaling for these innovative technologies that are necessary for these sectors to use to actually decarbonize. And it says here, we launched at COP26 with the steel, the shipping, the trucking, and aviation sector. We just at our annual meeting, or Davos, launched the aluminum and carbon removal sector. And at COP27, we'll be launching the concrete and chemical sector. And so what does it mean to launch? It means that what we've done is we've created a procurement commitment, something that a company can say, I'm going to buy. But what they're buying is, honestly and transparently, things that don't quite exist. And if they do, they exist in such a small amount that it's got a green premium. It costs more than its carbon-intensive alternative. And so this is why they're first movers, because they're standing up and they're saying, major brands, I take the risk of, for my company, making a purchasing decision that's integral to how I operate, based on the fact knowing that I might not be able to continue my operations because this might not actually be available, or if it is, I'm going to pay more. And that's what first movers do. They take risks. So we formulate these procurement commitments, and I'll show you what that actually means because it's sometimes easier to understand when you actually see the example of it. We formulate procurement commitments for these sectors working in partnership with other organizations. And for the sectors that I've mentioned, here are just some of the external organizations that we've worked with. Because the First Movers Coalition is actually committed to not recreating the wheel. We don't have time for that. What it's committed to is leveraging the power, the insights, the knowledge that's already out there. And so let me give you a quick run through of these commitments, these purchasing commitments that exist by sector. And again, we've launched 4 at COP26, 2 at Davos. We have 8 total, so 2 more exist that need to be formulated and launched. And one of the reasons that I'm super happy to be here today to speak with you is that one of the commitments is for cement and concrete, for the built space. And we've heard so much about how the built space really needs to change. Well, for those who may work with the built space, it might be nice if you think about joining us in developing a purchasing commitment that really helps decarbonize that. But I get ahead of myself. Let's just talk through quickly again, what does it mean to have a purchasing commitment? So here you see for aluminum, and again, I won't go into too much detail, but the notation here is that a company who has joined the First Movers Coalition has agreed to buying at least 10% of their primary aluminum, okay, that is coming in at near zero. Okay? And there's a lot more detail that I can go into, but it's basically saying that I, as a company, am either buying this aluminum, and so if you're a producer in the space, this would be relevant, or, as you see, there's additionally also recycled aluminum. Again, you can contact me for all of the details on this. I'll go quickly. For aviation, do you know that sustainable aviation fuels exist? You should. And so what we're trying to do is there is sustainable aviation fuels, and then there are sustainable aviation fuels that actually are so sustainable that, as you see here, we call them SAF, or Sustainable Aviation Fuels 85. SAF 85s, these are sustainable aviation fuels that cut emissions, life cycle emissions, by 85%. Doable, but not yet done. Can it be done? It would be done if everybody who flies and the companies that they represent and all of their people who fly actually make this commitment. That is the demand signal working to where the providers who already now make sustainable aviation fuels, who need to invest and change and use new technologies, that's the demand signal they need to feel confident that there's going to be a customer at the end of that line. And so if they redo their facilities, if they make that investment, then what happens, right, is that we have what we call the SAF 85 pulled forward and available. And when do we want this or any of the other commitments to be available? When do we want these technologies being used by suppliers? We want this by 2030. We want this by 2030. Why? Because everybody talks about 2050. Well, guess what? There's not going to be a 2050 for us to care about if we don't start hitting 2030. So this is why we're really moving this way. We have one for shipping, the same thing. If any of you ship your products, this is relevant. For steel, if steel happens to be a component of your products. For trucking, unless you walk your products to your customers or warehouses, trucking is applicable. And again, this is first movers, so this is cutting edge. But this is what we need now to stay on a 1.5 pathway. And then we get to carbon removal. Now, what I've just shown you are purchasing commitments that are abatement focused. So these are ones in which you keep doing what you need to do for an economic purpose, but you do it with an intense focus on decarbonizing that activity. But for those of you who read the recent reports that came out, we haven't been doing so well with our carbon reduction plans to date. And so what we also focus on is engineered solutions for carbon removal, the ability to take carbon out of the air, not through natural means, but in actual technological means. And those technological means the difference frequently between a natural carbon removal, trees, and engineered is what's called durability, how long that carbon is actually captured. And for us, for first movers, we look at 1,000+ years. So as far as we're concerned, we want technologies that will pool carbon and hold carbon for as long as necessary. And about 1,000 years is as long as we can technologically do right now. So this sounds, hopefully for some of you, compelling who run companies and who've internalized this, right? But it also probably sounds, for those who have forged paths, a bit, I don't know, that's really pushing the envelope. Is this just a pipe dream? Is this just one of these greenwashing moments? We don't think so. And there's some others who joined us who don't think so either. So as of our annual meeting at Davos, we now stand at 55 first mover companies. Brands who took a hard look and made the decision that they're going to take the risk. They're going to commit to an area, not normally an area that they supply, but an area that they buy in. They ship products, they truck products, they fly their products or their people, they put steel in their products, and they're going to work with the members of their value chain, right? Because it is a collaborative effort. You have to bring your value chain along. Work with the members of their value chain to meet these commitments. And these commitments mean that they're pushing their suppliers to use new technologies so that the products or the services that they're buying are as decarbonized as possible, as quickly as possible. And we're not alone only with companies. We also have, as of Davos, now 9 governments who have joined the First Movers Coalition. Why? Because as we are hearing, governments are waking up to the fact that, you know what? We need to create an enabling environment for industry to change because we still need economic stimulus. We still need jobs. We still need it to happen, but it can't come at the price of our future. And so we're very proud to have these governments join us as well. And so what does it mean to be a First Mover Coalition member, a company that joins? Well, what it is that you get to bring in members of your value chain, because you can't do it alone. We hear that consistently through today's conversations. You can't do it alone. You have to do it in partnership with your customer. You have to do it in partnership with your supplier, right? So it is a value chain approach. It also is working with implementation partners. So as I mentioned, the First Movers Coalition leverages the activities of other industry associations. It's not the lack of smart thinking that's out there, it's lack of implementation. And then, of course, it's also working with governments and financial and insurance players, because we need to have that enabling environment for these technologies to be pulled forward. The will might be there, but there's a lot of challenges that need to be overcome, some of them permitting and others building codes that a company can't do, right? So this is why we brought governments in as well. And as we find First Mover Coalition members, the companies who join at many different levels. Some join and are focused and engage in the discussions about how do I actually work with my value chain to make these purchasing commitments real. But others even go so far as to become a champion of the sector. And what does it mean to be a champion? It means to say, I have figured out how to actually meet this commitment in a certain way, and I'm going to talk about how I did it so that others can follow my path. Because that's what's necessary, right? So one of the things that I'm going to say to ensure that I have a short tenure at the World Economic Forum is to say, you know what? I don't really care if all of these companies who have joined actually achieve the commitment that they signed up for. What it really just takes is 1 or 2 companies who do, and who stand up and say, and this is how I did it. It just takes 1 or 2 who do and write things like Hanover Principles and say how you do it. It takes the first mover who actually achieves and paints the picture and the path for the others. And that's what I care about, because we're out of time. And we need to actually celebrate and bring forward the information for others to follow, which is the reason we're all here today too, right? Learn from everybody else, so we too can be as effective and efficient in moving forward to greater circularity. For this upcoming year, we're going to focus on a number of priorities. Of course, the launching of the new sectors. So concrete will be one that we're launching at COP27, and if there's anybody in the built space who's here today, we'd love to talk to you about the formulation of that commitment. Expanding our footprint, so if there's any companies who believe they are true first movers, who have the appetite for risk, this is a program for you. And then also, we are looking for anybody who would like to share the information that they have so that we continue to empower the first movers to be successful. Information about how to join, i.e. contact me. And we really are focused on making emerging clean technologies accessible and scalable, decarbonize those sectors that are adding to 30% of greenhouse gases, and keep us on a 1.5 Celsius pathway for ourselves and our children. Thank you.